Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Aftermath series. Let us waste no time at all and dive right into this week's episode of Critical Role. So of course we begin with the aftermath of Caleb receiving the dinner party invitation from Trent Ickathon. Jester asks if he's even interested in going, and Caleb says yes. Caleb is ready to face his past, ready to face the monster that ruined his life. But there are several things that he, as well as the rest of the party, are worried about, so they sort of begin speculating what Trent might hope to accomplish from this dinner. The party also asks Caleb what he hopes to accomplish, although he's not quite sure himself. He does make it very clear that this could be a trap, but he also wants to see if he can potentially redeem or save Astrid and Eodwulf. He still deeply cares about them and would like to see them maybe returned to the light. But the big thing that Caleb hopes to gain from this dinner is information. He wants to know what the Assembly is up to and how far this corruption goes. Caleb even asks if Bo and the Cobalt Soul would be willing to offer their resources to help uncover this corruption and surgically remove it, as Caleb put it. Caleb has made it very, very clear that he wants to break this vicious cycle that Trent has started. But before the party discusses further, Caleb brings them all to a quiet inn inside a room where he basically explains the rest of his backstory to some of the party members that he hadn't fully explained it to previously. I believe it was Ford and Jester and possibly Caduceus that didn't know that Caleb killed his parents. And so now the entire party is aware of the things that Caleb has done. And it was very difficult for him to say it, but it looks like he's begun to accept and move past it, and he's ready to face it, which is why he wants to go to this party. Jester does her best to reassure and comfort Caleb while he's explaining the situation. Caleb even says himself that he's a changed man. This is one of the only times we've heard him say this, and Bo even points that out. Caleb is now recognizing that he is a better person now than when he was. He's finally starting to separate himself from the awful experiences he went through with the Academy and with Trent Ickathon. But with all of that heavy conversation out of the way, Jester sends a message to Trent Ickathon, simply saying that they accept his invitation, and then the party teleports back to Nicodranus, where they have a relaxing evening at Veth's home. And we just get a wonderfully wholesome scene with the party and Veth's family all just having dinner together, having a wonderful time. And something to note that was rather interesting this episode is that Yasha seems to be more relaxed. She seems to be a bit more at ease and she's having fun. So it's nice to see that Yasha is also healing from her past wounds. During the night, Clay leaves the party for a brief period to cast Word of Recall at the lighthouse to the Wild Mother that resides on the beaches of Nicodranus. Once Clay finished the spell, he rejoined the rest of the party at the lavish chateau, where Caleb asked to see Jester's room. He's heard so much about it, why not see it firsthand? And so Jester brings the party up to her room, and we get to see pretty much where Jester grew up. She spent most of her time in this room. And as the party is admiring the artwork that she made herself that just adorns the walls, Jester also casts Word of Recall. The next morning, the party make their way back to Rexingtrum using the teleportation circle in the Cobalt Soul archive, and the party has a little bit of downtime before the dinner party later that evening. The party decides to commission some winter clothes since they will be going to Islecross and it will be dangerously cold up north. And I cannot wait to see the artwork that comes out of these new outfits, particularly the antlers that Veth wanted commissioned for her earmuffs. Bo and Caleb do a little bit more research on Islecross and Ayor. No crazy new information is uncovered. However, as Bo is researching, Udala Fawn approaches her and explains that their research into this Eyes of Nine entity has come up with absolutely nothing. They have no idea what this entity is. Udall asks Bo if there's anything else that may help them out with their research. Bo simply says that she'll get back to them. But perhaps, as Caleb said, maybe this Eyes of Nine thing really isn't anything in particular. Maybe it's not something we need to worry about. But after the winter outfits are commissioned and the research is done, the party gathers in their formal wear that they wore to the party in Nicodranus, and they make their way to Trent's tower. Upon entering this tower, they are greeted by portraits of the Marrow War between the Empire and the Jewelous Dominion, as well as imagery of the Plane of Fire, and a very large portrait of a younger Trent Ickathon, who almost seems to nod as they enter. The floor beneath the party begins to glow, and then rise, sort of like an elevator. They ascend past what feels like dozens and dozens of floors before finally coming to rest. And as soon as this elevator stops, there is a door in front of them that the party eventually goes through, and then standing in front of a fire in this dining room of sorts, we see the trio of Trent, Astrid, and Eodwulf. Trent welcomes the party to his dining hall and asks that everyone takes a seat. Caleb takes a seat next to Astrid, Jester takes a seat at the opposite head of where Trent is, and then Veth and Yasha playfully take the 2 seats that Eodwulf was going for, but then Caduceus offers him the 3rd place. But once everyone has taken their seat, Trent opens up the conversation by asking Caleb what it is he wants. What is the party's driving force in all of their endeavors? Caleb explains that he hopes to leave the world in a better place than when he found it. A noble cause for sure, and it's something that Trent also hopes to accomplish. Although his methods to accomplish this are rather terrible, to put it lightly. Trent inquires about the meeting that the party had with Vesta Ragna, and is curious what she has tasked them to do. The party is vague, but Trent can probably gather that Vess has instructed them to accompany her to Aor, or possibly to Shattengrad to do some tomb exploration. Eventually, the conversation shifts to put more of a focus on Caleb and everything he's gone through. And this is where we get an unfortunate revelation. Trent explains that Caleb needed to be broken. He needed to go through the things that he did in order to get to where he is now. He explains how Caleb's parents wanted Caleb to reach his full potential, and they were willing to do anything to get him there. And so Trent basically insinuated that he orchestrated everything that happened to Caleb. We obviously know that he made Caleb kill his parents, but Trent also orchestrated the entire sanitarium that he was in. Trent kept him in there for as long as he saw fit, and then when he thought Caleb had had enough, or that he was ready to re-enter society again, he planted the seed that allowed Caleb to escape. Trent really has been the mastermind behind all of Caleb's suffering from the very beginning. Trent explains how he sees Caleb's potential, he knows what he can become, and he is in a way grooming him for a position in the Cerberus Assembly, specifically Trent's own position. And now one thing to note as this whole scene is playing out, Caleb frequently looks towards Astrid and Eodwulf to see their reactions to things that are being said. Eodwulf is a bit more reserved, so it's kind of hard to gauge how he's feeling about all of this, but Astrid does seem to deeply care about Caleb and is very worried about him. But after Trent explains his entire side of the story, Caleb just straight up tells Trent that he would very much like to kill him, and that he's imagined himself strangling Trent with his own bare hands. And he goes even further to say that he wants to remove him from power. And Trent's only response was that nothing would make him more proud than to see Caleb take him out. Caleb then goes on to explain what he truly wants, and that is, of course, to remove Trent from the picture and to reshape and heal the corrupted system that Trent has put in place, and would like the help of Eodwulf and Astrid. But after Caleb finished his explanation of what he hopes to accomplish, the dinner began to reach its end. Trent thanks the party for joining him this evening and swiftly takes his leave. The party invite Eowulf and Astrid out for drinks, but they decline. However, Astrid does ask Caleb if he was serious about wanting to remove Trent. Caleb assures her that removing Trent is definitely a goal of his. And I think that's exactly what Astrid wanted to hear, because then she says to him, "I'll race you to the top." And I took that as Astrid essentially challenging Caleb to try to beat her to it. But then moving on, as the party makes their way to a tavern for some drinks, Clay explains that he does believe that Eowulf and Astrid are redeemable. They aren't completely lost. And he also brings up the idea that him and Jester could potentially resurrect Caleb's parents if he so desired. But Caleb needs a bit more time to think on that. At the tavern, Bo brings up her various theories surrounding the Eyes of Nine and Molly's potential connection to it. The party then also make the connection that perhaps Molly and his band of tomb takers, as they call themselves, were working with Vesteragna, and Yasha confirmed that Molly was doing some jobs in Shattengrad. Now that still doesn't give us any concrete information about his connection to the Eyes of Nine entity, but I think it is safe to assume that Molly did know Vesteragna. The party is eager to learn more about Molly's backstory, and so they send a message to the gentleman to get in contact with Cree so that they may talk to her and ask her more questions about Molly. However, the gentleman explains that Cree has left several months ago and has not been seen since. And so Jester messages Cree directly, but then Cree simply says that she doesn't believe she'll be able to help them. However, I don't think the party fully buys that, and they will likely attempt to track Cree down to ask her more questions. After they finish their conversations at the tavern, Caleb takes them to a new inn. Not the greatest of locations, but what he really needs is a closet. He funnels the party into this room with the closet, opens it up, and begins casting a spell. He lays out the wand that Kaliana gave him. He puts down the various pieces of stained glass, as well as the carved wooden figure of Frumpkin that he's been working on. He then mutters a few arcane words, and an amber doorway appears in front of the party. And through this doorway, they see a home of stained glass windows. Caleb looks to the party and welcomes them home as he steps through. And that is where the episode ends, and I can only assume that Caleb just casted Widowgast's magnificent mansion. But we have to wait a whole week before we hear his descriptions of what this mansion entails. But with all of that being said, we are going to wrap up. Let me know all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions during that episode. I think we can all agree that we all hate Trent even more than we already did after this episode. But anyways, I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you all next week.